Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar with Mikael Svenson. Mikael is CTO of Puzzlepart and one of the best developers of the world who work with search. So Mikael, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. So I'm sitting here almost by myself. There's one other guy in the office and it's beautiful sun outside here in Oslo. So I would rather be in the park with my kid and wife barbecuing, but that's how it is. I'll get some food afterwards. Yeah, so being a CTO at Puzzlepart basically means that I'm responsible for telling everyone this is the new tech, this is what you should look at. But in my regular day, I do consulting. So that's what I do. And what I do the least, and actually what I've done the least for probably the last 2-3 years, is search. But it's still fun. But that's what I'm known for, and it's always comes into different projects. So that's why I figured I'd title this webinar, How to Make Sure Your Content is Searchable the Way You Want. And my plan is to go over how is your content getting moved from where it's sitting and then over to the search index so you get it back. There's nothing really groundbreaking new, but I tend to get questions about this all the time. So either there's new people coming in or they're moving into areas where they haven't been working that much. So let's kick it off to the next screen. So basically, search is all about crawled and managed properties. So if you're not aware of what this is, crawled properties are basically the metadata on the item itself. That could be on a file or on a list item. And the managed property is the metadata in the search index. So that means there's a transference from the crawl property over to the managed property, and there's some different settings you can do. So just to illustrate, that means you start to create your content. That could be typically be in Word or in Excel or whatever application you create your content in. And then you need to store it somewhere. And in our context, since we're talking about search and SharePoint, that would typically be in a file library, in a site collection, or in your OneDrive. And then we have the awesome web crawler or file crawler, which takes the content from wherever you store it and processes it, and then puts it into this big vault, which is the search index, which you don't really have much control of, which is a big binary index black box. Even though the door is open here and you can look in, that's basically what you can do, at least if you're on premises. You can do some commandlets and start looking into the index, but you can't really do anything with it. And once it's all processed and stored, you get it back in this nice UI, which is, so this is the SharePoint homepage in Office 365 right now. I'm not sure I would call it beautiful, but I guess it's modern. To me, this shows very little data about what I'm getting back. But as you can see, I get people, I get sites, and I get files. And if you're curious who that nice-looking guy up in the right-hand corner is, my demo ghost, that's Dan Holm, and people tend to use his profile picture here and there. And just as a side note, people are actually creating fake profiles on Facebook for him to lure women for money. So he's being used for a lot of cons these days. But I'm not calling him, having him as my demo ghost in my demo environment. Right. So if we go over to the user profiles as the first piece of content we want to make searchable. So if you look on the right-hand side here, so this is a user profile property. This screenshot is taken from SharePoint Online. It would be analog to the setting you have on premises, more or less. That means you have an internal name. In this case, it's called LinkedIn URL, and I want this LinkedIn URL on my profile. That means all the employees can store their LinkedIn URL on the profile, so people can have a look look at their profile if they want. And since I want to use this in a search-based experience, that means I want to retrieve it and show it in a search result page. I click off on the search index, I click off the indexed checkbox. And what this does is when the user profile is indexed, you will get a crawl property over here called people :LinkedIn URL, which is the same internal name as you have on the property over there. So that's how to get that working. And of course, if you already have all your profiles and you go in and change the setting to indexed, nothing will happen in the index until you actually recrawl all the user profiles. So if you're on premises, you can do the easy way and go to your search service application and do a full crawl of all the user profiles. If you're in SharePoint Online, you can't really do that. Then you can use either my script, which is on my GitHub account, which will loop over all the user profiles and basically rewrite the department or birthday field just to get a last modified change type. And that will pick up the profile. Or I also have an app in the App Store which will do the same thing, but a bit more effectively, at least if you have thousands and thousands of profiles. And the reason you have to do that in SharePoint Online to mark the profile with an updated date is because there is no full crawl of user profiles. There's only incremental crawls, which seems to be between every 4 to 6 hours. And that means once you have the crawl property, you can map it to a managed property so you can retrieve it in search. So if we look at another property, here I created a property called Twitter handle. I've checked that off as indexed to make it searchable, but I also checked off the box to make it an alias. So checking a user profile property and make it an alias will make sure it gets returned in people results. So you see, so my Twitter handle on this profile is Mikael Svenson, and I search, I get it back. I think I can actually show that as well. So if I go to, I guess I can just go to my tenant. Let's just go to my Delve page first, and we have Delve here. And click me, update profile. Let's see. So here, see I have my Twitter handle. And then if I search in Delve, I actually get people result there, matching it. And if I go to the SharePoint homepage, I will get the result there. And if I go to the classic results page, page not found, that's always interesting. So let's do like this instead. So this is the old classic enterprise search center. Let's search for my Twitter handle. And you see the interesting part there, I don't get any matches on the everything page, and that's because the result block, which yields people searches, actually won't pull in the phonetic search. But if I go to the people tab, I will get an exact match. So that's just a drawback by using people search in a result block. You can't turn on phonetic search. But then again, are we still using the Enterprise Search Center? That's another story altogether. Microsoft seems to have abandoned it, but it's still there. Okay. So if we move on. Right, so that was a little bit about the crawl properties. And then for the managed properties, so this is important for making it searchable in the index if you map it. So if you map a crawl property to a managed property because you want to retrieve it, we can just map it and you don't need to think about it. But if you also want it full text searchable when you map it to a managed property, I'll go over what makes the property actually working afterwards, then you need to set the right full text index. So if you see here, so it's set in the people index. So for example, if I took my LinkedIn URL, so let me go to my search schema on the 10th level. And we're waiting for it. This was a lot quicker 1 hour ago. And then let's go into the search schema. And let's find, for example, a refinable string. Refinable string property. Let's do refinable string 06, for example. So say I want to map my, my LinkedIn URL to this property. To add mapping. And then we could pick from people. And then we should have the LinkedIn URL. And if you're curious about that sound in the background, that's someone ringing the doorbell at my office. And I have no idea who that should be. Yep. So now I've mapped this to a refinable string. That means if I create a search application or have a refiner, I could add the refiner and point it to refinable string 06. And I would get that LinkedIn URL back. If I wanted the content of this now also searchable, then I need to point it to the correct index. So here it says default, but I need to set it to the people index because default is for files and list items. People are when you search for user profiles. So that's very important. If not, it will not, it does not work. If you saw, there's actually 3 more full text indexes there while we're looking at it, full text index 1, 2, and 3. In theory, you could have created your own full text index. So a full text index is what SharePoint searches against when you only type search terms and don't do like title colon or a property colon and on the search term like a property query. But the thing is, when they created SharePoint 2013, someone forgot to implement the query UI or query API in SharePoint 2013 going forward, so you could actually target one of these indexes. So there's no, so I mean, you can create them, you can map properties in them, but there's no way you can target that index. So they're totally unusable. In fast search for SharePoint in SharePoint 2010, you could use this in some interesting, nice ways actually. But here, so I would rather see that they just remove those 3 since you can't target and query against them anyways. And I don't think they will ever fix that unless there's some big customers listening to this webinar who sees a good need to do that, and then it might be possible. Can you just excuse me for a minute and I'll go open the door. Right back. Sorry about that, everyone. Okay, so that was the user profiles. So now it's time to go over to SharePoint's list and libraries. So as I said, metadata. So metadata on a file comes, or a list item comes either from the storage system. That means if it's on a file server you're indexing, it could be the date or the creator or last save date, whatever field is available, and it picks up. And then in SharePoint, it's any column you add to the library where you store a file. That's metadata. But it can also be metadata coming from inside the file itself. For example, PDFs might have some more metadata, and those can also turn into crawl properties based on the parser of the file. If you have an enabled Azure Information Protection, for example, that adds metadata inside the Office file formats, which will turn into crawl properties on in the search index. And for images, you have EXIF data, and if you have other file formats, it's basically depend on the iFilter processing the file, whatever metadata it can pull out from within the file format. And if it picks out metadata, it will output that as crawl properties, which you can then map and use. Well, then the next part would be to start looking at columns in SharePoint lists and libraries. So if you do a list column, so if you see here, I have a column called sensitivity. I actually called it demo sensitivity first, and then I renamed it. So that's why it says sensitivity here first. But if you see up here in my URL, it says field equals demo sensitivity. So I created a column called demo sensitivity first, added data, and that turns into a crawl property called OWS underscore and the same name as the internal name of the property, of the column. And by default, you see the small check mark down there. It says include in full text index. So that means whenever you create a column directly on the list, that will be included in the full text index. So if you add some data to the column, it will be searchable. So if I pull up my search application, I like using that instead of the UI, just for show. And then, so here I have a document called demo search document. You see it has got a column called sensitivity and one called comment. So if I now search for demo search document, see I get a hit. And now if I add public, I'll still get a hit. And if I add comment, which is text from my comment column, I still get a hit. And that's because those pieces of data have gone into the crawl property and are then automatically included in the full text index. When you move over to site column, the story is a little bit different. So yes, you will still get the same crawl property OWS underscore and internal name as you did for a regular list column. But in addition, you get two more properties. One automatically create crawl property and one automatically create managed property. The managed properties are not included in the full text index by default. I put a little asterisk there, and that's because except for taxonomy columns. So that means if you have a site column, sorry about that, if you have a site column pointing to a term set, you can actually search for the term GUID in free text and you will get a hit. The crawl property name is an OWS underscore Q underscore and the type of the column, meaning could be text, person, choice, etc., all the different types. And then you have the same for the managed property. See, this one's of type text, and then get a managed property called demo content OWS text by default. So that means if I search for content in that column, when I search for comment, I'm actually getting a hit from this crawl property and not from this managed property over here, right? And that's why, so if they hadn't created this extra crawl property, I mean, if I would have mapped the original crawl property to the managed property, which is not marked as searchable, I would not get a hit when I search for comment in free text. Hope that's crystal clear. I know it's a bit hard to understand that. So, which is why I have created a matrix. So if you read this from left to right, that means if you have a crawl property which has a check mark saying include in full text index and it's not mapped to a managed property at all, then the column is full text searchable. If the checkbox is not included in full text index and it's not mapped to managed property, then it's not full text searchable. For the next one, I mean, if you map it to a managed property, regardless of the setting of the crawl property, if the managed property has a check mark saying it's searchable, then it's full text searchable. And also if the managed property you map it to is not searchable, then it's not included in the full text index. So that means the managed property overrides the behavior of the crawl property when you map it. And that's why it's important for site columns to actually have two pairs. And then, of course, we have all the nice schema levels. As you've seen, I've changed my schema when I looked at it at the tenant level, since this is SharePoint Online. If you're on premises, you probably don't have the tenant levels. You have the SSA level, but there's also schemas on the site collection and on the site level, and you can do it's different limitations on the different levels. And then each level will inherit from the previous. So that means if you're at the site level, it will inherit everything from the SSA level and up, unless you override it. That said, I would recommend for the easiest way to make sure everything works is to map crawled and managed properties on the tenant or SSA level. It is, however, okay to map them at the site collection level if the content you work with and the user experience using those properties reside in that site collection. I mean, it's scoped. Maybe have a custom list, a custom ordering list, or a project directory, for example, and you want to show those in user experience based on search, then it's perfectly okay to map those just on the site collection level if you don't have tenant or SSA permissions. But then it's only working on that site collection. That means if I were at some other site collection and try to retrieve, for example, one of your mapped refinable strings, I wouldn't get it on the other site collection. That would only work on this site collection. Just on a side note on that, it's very hard to see where a mapping is actually coming from if you don't know where it's at. So I mean, so this is a site collection, and if I go to my settings page on this, so let's see, I have my search schema on the site collection. So there's, so if I search for refinable string, for example, so I haven't mapped any special ones here, but I wouldn't actually be able to, by just looking at this screen, which properties have been mapped only on this site collection and not from the tenant level. The only way I could see that is by exporting the search schema on this level. So if I go back, so if I export the search configuration, just do that on this site. Because when you export the search configuration, you get all the custom settings on that level. So let's see if we take this file and we open that up. So see, this is pretty blank. So I haven't done any particular mappings here. What I do have is I have a pull request for the Office PNP commandlets, which will actually take that file and process it for you, and it will show all the custom managed properties you created on the level you query on, and then also you can see which crawl properties have been mapped to it. So you show all your custom managed properties, or all the properties you have mapped to one the pre-existing refinable string ints, etc. So that should probably be useful just to find custom mappings at a certain level instead of start looking at the XML. So look forward to someone actually processing that and getting that into the commandlets. Right. And then we have something called weights. So that's when you start to query for the content. So if we go back to looking at a managed property, so you saw the full text index, you also have a weight group. So this does not mean that context 0 has less weight in the full text index than context 14, because this is by association to whatever properties have been added to your best match 25 section of the rank profile. And I hope that sounded Greek to everyone, because it is. It's kind of Greek. It's hard to comprehend. But best match 25 is the technical model used when returning results in free text. It easily said, it looks at the term frequency in the full index, and in a document that means if you search for a term which appears less often, it gets more weight than a term which appears more often. For example, puzzle part would be a very common term in our search index, but in a customer's index, it might be a very unique term, getting more weight. So if we look at the context weights and look at my naive interpretation of the rank model. So in the default model, title has the most weight, which is in weight group number 1. So that means if you have a column you want to be as important in free text search when returning results as title, you would add that to the weight group number 1. The second one is qlog click text. Third one, social tag, where file name, author, body. So that means if I wanted my comments column to be not as important as title, but quite important, I would add that. I would map that to weight group number 3. So that means if I go to if I do this refinable string number 6. So if I now change this from context 0. So I was saying context number 14, which is, for example, which is social tag. Just map that to social tag. Then this managed property, when using the default rank profile, will get the same weight as specified in the rank profile for for social tag. It's not that easy. So these are just my relative weights. If you say title is the most important, and then the other are relative to title, I try to sort of calculate that up. It's probably not correct at all, but it gives at least a meaning how that works. So this is a default rank model for content. If we, however, look at the default people search model, then job title is actually the most important one. It ranks the highest. And then you have responsibilities, preferred name, ranking weight name, memberships, and contents hidden. Contents hidden is typically the managed property you would map user profile properties, the crawl properties to, just to get a recall. That means to get a full text hit that's been there since a long time back. And then you see there's different weight groups here. So here, the most important weight group is number 2, and then 3, 1, 13, 6, and 5. I haven't added everyone, but that's at least something to work from. So if you start looking at the different columns you have, either if it's on a user profile or on a piece of content, and you want the content of that column or property to mean a little bit more than nothing, then you could add them to the different weight groups. But the actual impact depends on the rank model you're using. So that means if you're using the default rank models, these 2 screens might be fairly accurate. If you're using one of the other rank models, you have to export the rank model XML and see which fields are actually included into the best match 25 section of that rank model. All very advanced, not easy to read at all. There's numbers with decimals, with like 13 decimals, because it's all machine generated. But you can take a peek and see if you can make any sense. If you make more sense of it than I have done on these two screens, please let me know. I'll be happy to spread the word or change my slides if I've done an awful big mistake here. And then there's also a component in the rank profile which impacts how content is actually returned or the order is returned, and that's authoritative pages. So this influences the static rank when it's indexed. So if you see down here, there's a set of site collection there. You see I have a lot of foo bars and some other test site collection. It's very random how they have been. I haven't added those there manually myself, but it means content based on click distance from these sites will actually move higher up than content not in this list. So if I just go back to my search settings, and if I go to my authoritative pages, we have that. And it's also dependent on the rank model how much weight these are given. What I could do like this, because it's a prefix start. Like everything on sites is, for example, more important than anything on Teams, if you use those two managed paths. If you're on premises, you have more control. Or I could say, okay, let's say this on the second level, I say everything on my root site collection, because that's where, for example, HR or all the departments have their important information. That should always be given more rank just because of the location, because it's on the root site. And then everything on sites gets a little bit less, and then everything on Teams, if those are ad hoc sites, could be even less. I've actually started on most of our customers now. We all self-service created sites are created on the Teams managed path, and then all manual ones are on sites, because those are more authoritative than the ad hoc ones. And then if you have something you want below everything else, you can add those sites there. Doesn't mean they won't show up in the search result, but it will actually be, any hits in those will appear below content in these sites. So it's something to look at. And then, of course, you need to reindex all the content for this to kick in if you start adding new URLs here. And that was actually what I had. So here's some references. You'll get the slides later. So I guess it's time for some Q&A. I think I got some questions in advance, actually, so I can go over those first. So there was a question, what can be done to configure SharePoint Search to take advantage of metadata assigned by Windows file classification infrastructure? Hybrid scenarios. As far as I know, the default file crawler will not look at any extra metadata at all, so you would probably have to implement a custom connector, and then you could output whatever custom metadata which gets turned into crawl properties yourself. Maybe not the best answer, but I think that's the right answer. You would have to do that yourself. And then there was also a question about Azure information protection. I don't know if everyone knows what Azure information protection is. I can show that. So it's basically setting a set of policies. So you can see that appearing here in my PowerPoint. I can see this slide deck is personal, public, general, confidential, or highly confidential, and it uses Azure rights management behind the scenes. And so I could also add rules saying if I add, for example, a social security number to this, it would automatically say tag it as confidential or give me a hint that it's confidential. So you can have rules when you save it as well. It doesn't matter if this document is saved in SharePoint or not, because the rights management is included inside the file and not where it's sitting. So that means if I classify this as highly confidential and only employees in my company can read it, even though if I send it to a third party, they wouldn't be able to open the document because it's protected and they don't have an account and rights through my Azure rights management service in my tenant. So that's something to look at. But what happens is when you tag these different labels, it actually adds 8 different crawl properties per label. So I actually had a blog post recently explaining this, and that was based on the question for this webinar. And then this explains how you can find those crawl properties, and then you have to map each crawl property per label to a managed property, and then you could use those in search. So that's just another example of the application adding metadata to your file. And then there was a question, how do I get content out of the cloud index? There's a couple of different ways. If you delete, if you only want to delete some of the content, then you can remove the content source, and then the Cloud SA will actually send the information over to the cloud index to remove that content. And you can also, if you do an index reset on the Cloud SSA, it will also in time it will send signals to the cloud index to remove all the content. So as long as you just don't blatantly remove the SSA without manually either removing content source, start address, or resetting the index, you should not get orphaned items in the index. So for the index reset, that was added to the April 2016 CU for 2013. If you did an index reset without the CU, you would actually have orphan data. If you end up in a scenario with orphan data, so it might, if you have a lot of data indexed to the cloud index, it might take some time before all is removed. But if you see orphan data, open a support ticket and have Microsoft help you out. That's the only way beside that. But there are some commandlets and some APIs you can actually use to work with or remove stuff from the cloud index as well. So those were the questions I got up front. So do we have any other questions?
Yes, basically we've got some questions in the chat window, and and everyone, if you want to ask Mikael any kind of questions, please enter it in the Q&A window. You can find it in the bottom of the Zoom window. I try to go through on the chat window as well and extracting the questions for you. So the first was from Diana. She's asking, what is the best practice for using the managed property refinable string XX? Do you start from 01 and move down?
Yeah, what's the best? So I typically start from 00 and go down. But if I get, sometimes if I'm at a customer and I don't have control, maybe I'll start on 20 or I'll start on 50, because on string you have 200. I think the most important part is to use the refinable ones and add an alias to them so you can easily see that they have been used. I think I had an alias on my, let's see, did I have, if I go to the managed properties, refinable string. Yeah, managed properties first. But so I think the most important part would be add an alias, because that way you see what it's actually being used for. And yes, you can create custom string properties as well, and the linked URL is actually just search here first, refinable string. Or an employee number, for example, might be a good case where you want to create a custom one. So that means if you need the text to be searchable and retrievable, then you need to do then you should do a custom managed property, because the refinable strings are not searchable by default, and don't change them. Yeah. So here you see I have added some aliases for these, which clearly then indicates or should indicate what it's actually being used for. So start on 0 or start at some interval, or just decide on if you have maybe department A uses from 0 to 10, and then someone else, if you want to allocate them for different applications, especially if you do it on the tenant level or SSA level, if different applications are using them, then you might just want to at least bunch them together by usage. I think that's the best recommendation I can give. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you. That's a good one. I really like this
Mm.
aliases
Yeah.
trick. Okay, the next question is, when you export a search configuration,
Yes.
you said it will provide information at that level. How
Yes.
do you get the full picture of the search configuration for the entire tenant?
For a tenant, well, so the only way you can do that is actually creating a nice loop, which loops over all your site collections and all your subwebs and exports the file for all webs and site collections. There's no API which will give you all modifications out there. Even it's actually the same if you're on premises, unless you start poking into the database, which you probably shouldn't do due to support reasons. You're not allowed to query the database, but at least you could probably go directly to the database and get the changes. So imagine a company with tens or 20 or 100,000 employees. You have so many site collections, and if people start doing changes, yeah, it's nightmare. The only thing you can do is loop over, and that's sort of why I created that command. It won't make it any quicker, but at least it's easier to process the output of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The next one is, what is the Q log clicked text?
What is the QLog click text? It's an internal property. So if you're on the Enterprise Search Center and you search for a term, and when you click on the result, that the term you used is stored in that managed property as part of the document. Yeah.
Okay.
So the fun part would be, so if you create a hyperlink pointing to a document with a term not in the document, that also gets included. So it's actually, it's in theory possible you could get terms added to your document which is not in your document searchable by default if you by using this QLink, but it basically has all the search terms used to get to your document. I'm not sure, it doesn't keep those for forever, and I'm not sure if it's, remember if it's retrievable or not. Let's see. No, so it's not retrievable. But if you made this retrievable, you could actually see the terms being added as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, how are aliases used?
Aliases, yeah. So aliases are used when you do a property query. Don't exactly. So I mean, so say you have. Say I mapped my Twitter handle to refinable string 06. That means I could do refinable string 06 and then my Twitter handle, right, as a property query. That will return result, or I could just use the alias instead, Twitter handle. So I mean, any alias can be interchanged by the actual property name when you do a property query. So if you do a display template and retrieve data back, I always try to add my aliases instead of refinable string 01 or 2, whatever, because you don't really know what the data is. So that's so you can use it as the name of the managed property, and you can add more than one alias as well. You just I think you put a semicolon between them, and you can have more aliases than one. So that means you could teach your users to do a Twitter handle, or maybe they could, or whatever term makes sense to them as part of advanced search if you want, and then still use the refinable string and ints, but give them a good alias, so which is more user friendly.
Yep. Thank you. Yes, there are several questions about your commandlet, where it can be found.
Yeah, where it can be found. So right now it would be as a pull request. Let's see. So it hasn't been accepted into Office PMP yet, but I can just show what it will look like. Let's see if I do this. Yeah. So it will actually output something like this if you use it. It was like your custom property, the aliases, the mappings, and the type. So if you're prone to coding, you can pull down the PNP commandlet project yourself, and you can and then you can take the code I have added here. So this is the code doing it. And then you can have it working, or you just have to wait for the Office PMP guys to have time to review my pull request and decide if it's a good fit, or if they want to rework it into other one of the commandlets. But so my idea is to add it as a parameter to the get PMP search configuration commandlet, and then instead of getting the complete XML, do manage property mappings instead, and that would give you an output like the like this. Yeah. So you just have to wait. When that goes into a PMP release, I'll be sure to blog it so people are aware of it.
Yep.
Yep.
And maybe if you can send me the URL, I can also email it to everyone on this webinar. So
yeah. So I mean, so we don't know if it will be implemented like this. So this is my proposed solution. That's what
sure.
That's what a pull request means. That means Irvin van Hoon, who has been assigned to this, has to look at it and see if he agrees with my implementation before it goes into production. So yeah.
Okay, but when it goes, I'm sure it will. But when it goes, just drop me the URL and I will let you know.
Yeah, I will do that.
Okay, thank you. One more question. Do I need to start a full crawl after mapping crawl properties to a refinable property?
Yes, or you need to re-index the content affected. So if it's only content on one list, you could go into that list and you could click just re-index this list, or you could go inside re-index this site and wait, and then when the content has been re-indexed, that would work. If it's for all content, you would have to re-index all the content. So if I go, so I have created a script. SPO trigger reindex. There's one script for the tenant or for site or for users, which will basically loop over and do that for you. So if you do the 10, it will go through all the site collections and sort of through code do the reindex this site button for you. So you don't have to go through it. So that's the only way you can re-index all the content in SharePoint Online, because there is no full crawl for anything. So you need to use one of these. Or I've created this application which will do it for you. So it gives you a UI where you can just click that, and because of course it's not free, but took me a little bit of time to develop it. But for sites, it basically does the same thing as the script. For user profile, it uses something called the bulk upload API, where you can change a lot of user profiles in one go to do it quicker. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. How to remove imported search configuration schema from site collection level?
So there's two answers. If you imported it manually through the UI, there's no way you can actually remove it. You have to know all the pieces you added and then manually go and remove it. If, however, you develop a SharePoint app using the app model, you can actually, through the app model, import search schema or search schemas, but you cannot do property mappings in those. You can do query rules and result blocks and all of that, but you cannot do property mappings. So if you have, might support result source as well, I don't remember. But at least if it, so if you have query rules in your schema, and do it through a SharePoint using the add-in model, using Visual Studio to create this, and then you can install the app, and when you remove the app, it will actually remove all the specific schemas as well. So wouldn't it be great if they had added that API in general, not only tied to an app? But that's the only way you can get it back and forth. But it doesn't work for property mappings, unfortunately. Which goes back to my commandlet. Then you can run the commandlet and see, okay, what modification has been done, and then you can go through each one, and then you can manually remove them. Yeah.
Great.
Or that would actually be a nice, if there's an API. I'm not sure if there's a CSOM API to add and remove query rules. If there were, you could then take the export of the XML and parse it, I guess, and then manually go and remove everything. But yeah, nice thought, but I don't think the APIs are there for SharePoint Online.
Okay. The next one, your slide told the search schema levels inherit from the level above. If I reconfigure a managed property on a lower level, I map it to another property. How does search react? Get two results for the same query, or the search will be different depending where you query from?
Yeah, that's right. So that means if you on one site collection mapped file name to title instead, that means if you fire off a search on that site collection, you would get the file name as title, and everywhere else you would get the same or the default title. So when you map at the lower level, you will override the settings on the level above you when querying at that level.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, just to iterate, I think the most common mistakes is that people go to site collection and they map a crawl property to a managed property on that site collection level, and they expect that to work on other site collection, and that surely doesn't. That means if you, that's the most common mistake.
Yes, I can see it several times as well. All right, two more questions. Could you please suggest best references or step-by-step guides to quickly update on search concepts for beginners, intermediate members?
Don't you have any good material on that, Agnes?
Not yet, working on it.
Yeah, for beginners. I think I was search is search is not for beginners. You quickly have to loop your head through some pretty advanced stuff. I would love to get some feedback how you would like that material to look like, and it would be interesting to perhaps write something for that. I guess on the query side, my blog post and book, Search Queries Explained, sort of goes through from an example perspective. It has a lot of samples how to query, and then it explains how that works. So that might be also for beginners and advanced people. But the crawl properties and managed property stuff, I mean, it's kind of hard to grasp. Maybe we should have do a infogram or something showing this in a nice map, how it all ties together from metadata to crawl property to managed property to end result. But it's all this, and then you have all these settings right on the crawl and managed properties, which gives it different behavior, and it quickly becomes harder than just for beginners. So
yep.
You just have to get at it and read stuff, and then you eventually understand it. Or ask questions. Ask questions to me or Agnes on either Yammer, Twitter, whatever. I think we all are more than happy to answer questions. You can also ask on the Microsoft Tech Forum. In my case, be sure to @ me if you want me to answer, because I don't read all the questions all the time. But if someone @ me, I'll be happy to go in and answer if no one else answers before me.
Yep. Someone is asking about your book. I'm going to make sure to send out everyone the book's URL and also the recording URL. So you can expect an email from me later this week with all those URLs and recording and everything, and the book will definitely be included.
Yeah.
And I left my favorite question to be the last one.
Okay.
Because first I can see the very same question here at least 3 times. Second, I also get this question several times, and I really would like to get your insight or your opinion on this. So the question is, it is very confusing to tell people which search to use, normal or classic search box and search center, SharePoint, home search, dev, etc.
Yeah.
What do you recommend and where is it going in the future?
I would recommend you guys to listen to BA Insights' latest podcast, which was released today, actually. Well, be sure to add it in a note as well, where Mark Anderson, Jeff Fried, Matthew McDermott, and myself had a discussion around some of this as well. Where is it all going? I think, or at least I hope, that the Delve search page and the SharePoint home search page sort of gets unified. I hope we will get some extensibility points. As I said when I showed that, I think it shows way too little metadata. There's no domain knowledge which could be useful to show at all, right? So if I go to let's go to SharePoint home. Let's see. So I get these files, right? I mean, I don't even see, well, I see it says on search demo, but it would be nice to see some more information on this, right? I think this just doesn't cut it. If I had some custom columns, why couldn't I be able to add them in some way, right? Yeah. So should you still use a classic result page? I think if you have people who can maintain your search solution and know which verticals to add on this page, yeah, everyone, yeah, still get that error. All right. Who knows which verticals to add? If they know how to customize the different results, maybe add some other side results here. If I have someone who can cultivate that side, I think this site still has a place to go. I mean, I've created several enterprise search centers where we've done a lot on the design and user experience to make it usable for that company and within that domain. But you need to invest something in your domain. The SharePoint homepage and Delve page seems, well, it tries to pull in your context, saying, okay, we know who you work with, and then it ranks using signals from the graph, which is all fine. I tried to simplify it. I guess it's just sorting the results by popularity or people close to you, but there's a lot of other context as well. So for most companies, I mean, you have at least one or two pieces of metadata which makes sense to them, right? Which you should, either it could be a refiner here or it could be a vertical up here. Until that's resolved for the SharePoint homepage, I don't know. But Microsoft seems to invest their time in the SharePoint homepage. Maybe Delve search as well, or I hope those goes together. If we'll get another enterprise search center, I don't know. I'm having lunch with someone at the Fast Office next week. Maybe I'll get some insight. I probably can't share it even if I get it, but maybe at least I'll get to know one the direction. I had a post, I think it was last year. I do believe, where I still believe in enterprise search. But, so I do believe in enterprise search. I'm not so sure if I believe in the enterprise search center going forward. I think putting search into the applications or all the workspaces where you use will probably make more sense and be more used going forward. I mean, if you're in Word, bring results into Word. So maybe you don't have a unified search engine like Google. If that suits everyone, I don't know. We'll just have to see. What I do know is that enterprise search hasn't changed much in the last 15 years. We have refiners, we have metadata. People who know how to use it love it, and they find their stuff quicker. So setting up an enterprise search center will probably make people find your content faster than using the default search page, unless they're looking for their own content or recently created content. Then they will probably find it quicker on the SharePoint homepage. That was a long, windy answer.
But it's fair enough. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. So everyone, thank you very much for joining. Mikael, thank you very much. I think it was a very, very useful overview and a
Yeah.
very nice overview of metadata in search.
Mm.
This webinar has been recorded. I am going to process it and upload to YouTube. And then later this week, I am going to send everyone an email with the recording URL and the search query book of Mikael
Yeah.
and
Links to the slides.
links to the slides and link to the VA Insights latest podcast, which Mikael just mentioned. So just expect an email from me later this week with a lot of URLs.
Yeah.
Thank you again and have a good day.
Yeah, and thank you for having me, and I apologize if this became very technical, but yes, search is very technical, and knowing exactly how to get your results the right way out, you have to do trial by error and reindexing. There is no one way.
Right.
Yeah. So I
Right.
guess I'll end with that, and Diane has to answer her managed metadata question outside this webcast.
Managed metadata question. I cannot
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, it was a question, what are your thoughts on managed metadata in the term store?
Oh yes, in the middle of a lot of.
Or I'll do it quick. My thoughts are, if you only have one language, it works since it indexes the primary label. If you have multiple labels in different languages, tough luck.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Yeah. Okay.
Have a
Bye.
good day. Bye-bye.